Welcome back to smarthelping.com. Got a pretty cool model here for you. It's preferred equity. If you remember, the last set of models I did involved preferred return, so you might want to go back and watch those videos. They were right before this one. So preferred equity is different than preferred return, and preferred equity can have a preferred return along with it. It typically does, but it doesn't have to. Um, so preferred equity means you have a claim on the equity you put into a venture, and so that means in the most typical situations, the preferred equity is priority payment before anybody else gets anything. And so I've done a model here that allows you to toggle a bunch of different things and see what the payouts look like. I've done it so you can actually have preferred equity with a preferred return, or it could have a 0% preferred return. And you'd ask, well, why do you have a 0% pref return for the preferred equity? Well, the preferred equity could have a deal where whatever they put in, they get back out priority payments, like they're paid out first before anybody else. And then maybe they have a kicker on any profit beyond that, they get just a certain percent. So you can see here if that does happen, like here's the kicker kicking in, and they get priority payments here on, well, if there's no preferred return, they get nothing back but their equity. So you can see they're just getting their equity back here, and then once they've gotten all that back, there's a remaining for everybody else that's not preferred equity um, after the equity kicker. And then there's some internal rate of return that results from that, which we've got return ratios here. So there's a lot of different variations you can do with this model that handles all the complex logic behind the, the regular usage of preferred equity. You can set this up so you have preferred equity and no kicker. You can just put a 0 for the kicker, and then it's just based on the equity getting returned and then whatever the preferred return is. You can have this so you have preferred equity and then common equity investors that split a waterfall with the general partners. So you basically have a stack where you have preferred equity first, their preferred return, their equity gets returned, and then they get a share of the profits. And then after that, everything that remains can go to the second group of common equity. And the common equity could be made up of investors, limited partners, and the sponsor, or it could be just the limited partner or just the sponsor. So you can see here if we did, let's say we did 0% for the common equity, and let's say 100% of the funding came from preferred equity. So if we did that, oh, hold on. We have to say something came from the sponsor. Let's say 90% came from preferred, 10% came from the sponsor. So then you see the preferred equity gets its share, the sponsor gets its share of what's remaining, which they don't really get anything, and they have to contribute the percentage of their equity, and then they get this final payout in year 10, and that's after the preferred equity has finally been paid off. And this also has basically some contributions in year 1 and 2, which I'm actually going to clear out. So if we put 0% here, you can see what happens is, or if we put, I'm sorry, if you put 0% in the equity kicker, you can see what happens now is there's just a preferred return. And why does the preferred equity, why is that negative? Oh, My bad. This is the running preferred equity balance. So this is just taking the cumulative effect of this, so it's not negative. Um, let's do like let's say we have a refinance here. Let's say it's like $2 million of liquidity. So now, okay, this is what I wanted to show. So now you can see if there's no equity kicker or profit kicker for the preferred equity, once they get all their equity paid back in their preferred returns, then they're out of it. And then the rest of the money goes to either this split where I've done a secondary split where any remaining cash flows after the preferred equity does its contributions and distributions flows to the secondary one that does it between common equity and the sponsor. Oh, the sponsor could be part of the common equity. So we can see here in this case where I did nothing for this, it's all going to the sponsor. So you can see they just get all of the whatever's left over down here. Um, what else? Variations. I did every single possible permutation I could think of that makes sense in this whole setup. Let's say you got 40% here, 50 here, 10 there. Um, so in this case, we have the waterfall happening with the sponsor and investor of common equity, and that goes based on these hurdles, which you could just keep it pari passu the whole time, which means you just get out what you put in, and that means their internal returns are going to be the same. Or you could do promotes um, on top if you want promotes to happen between the common equity parties, and you just set the hurdles here, and that will work and all flow through just fine. And you have the preferred equity sitting on top of that. So it's preferred equity first. Any profit kickers, preferred return is paid to them. Anything left after that goes to your second tier of things, which is common equity. And I've done a waterfall for that. Now it doesn't have to be a waterfall, like I just said. You could just set each of these equal to what the pari passu rate is, and not do the hurdles, and that works just fine as well. However you want to do it. I did a visual here that shows this is the total cash flow that happens each year from each of the parties. So here's the refinance that's split, and then after that you can see what happens is, well, um, the preferred equity gets its money back, most of it, and then they're only getting a small share of the profits after that. Now here's why some people might like to do preferred equity versus common equity. It's less upside. So you can see here the common equity is getting all of this upside, but they don't have priority of payment return. So you see in the first 3 years, any cash flows that happen go to the preferred equity first before the common equity is getting anything. So that's less risk for the preferred equity because they're just, essentially, if you will get paid your money back plus your preferred return and kicker. Well, the kicker is just going to be zero if there's no money left, but you'll get your preferred return and equity back priority before anybody gets anything. And then after that, usually it's going to be less because it's less risky, so therefore less profit potential. And that's why the common equity has more risk. You're not getting priority in their equity, but they're getting more of the profits if they do happen. So this is a great model to demonstrate that happening, and um, we've got internal rate of returns here, we've got equity multiples, and we've got charts to show kind of what happens over time. I think this is super clear. You can look through all the calculations. If you were to go ahead and purchase a template, I'm just going to sell it for a one-time fee of $45. It'll be available at smarthelping.com, and um, you can get this one. You can get just a preferred version. Uh, I'll probably put it up on Eloquent and eFinancial Models as well. What else? What else? Oh, so I did keep in the preferred return. You'll see that I had options so you can say, let's say, what if the cash available is only like very small at the beginning, or it's just less than whatever the preferred return is for this preferred equity um, leg? Well, you can decide here if you want that shortfall to increase the equity of the preferred equity amount, which would then increase the preferred return in the following year and increase the total amount that needs to be paid back before anybody gets anything. So all of that logic is happening here. So you can see in year one we were short. So the cash flow is 5,000 to the preferred equity leg, and we're short by 64,000. So that other 64,000 goes on top. So you see now the equity goes from 600 to 664, and now we have preferred return of 76,000. We only have 10,000 available, so that all is going to go to the preferred equity. You can see here 10,000. And the remainder that is still owed, we're now up to, well, we're short total of 130,000. So that's going to continue to add up on this total equity here. So now we're at 730 equity. A new preferred return is now calculated based on that. And any cash beyond the preferred return is applied to the shortfall, the cumulative shortfall. And you can see how we go here and we track it. So now we have applied some to the shortfall. We've covered the current preferred equity with this 200,000. Now let's say in year four, there's like a refinance or something, there's more cash available. So now in year four, we're paying back all of the accrued unpaid preferred returns. We're paying back the rest of the remaining equity and the preferred return for that year. So you can see this final year is going to be a big bump for the preferred equity. They're getting basically everything back. Um, and now they're also getting there's cash left over after they're paid, so they're getting some of that based on their kicker of 10%. And there's still, even remaining after that in year four, we still have 1 million left to go to the sponsor and other common equity, which you can see here. This 1,183 comes here, and that gets split through all these waterfalls, and you eventually it's split based on the hurdle rates above between the general partner and limited partner common equity. And then though you can see how those hurdles are working as you move through time, and they're getting the rest of the cash flows after the only thing that the preferred equity is getting after that year four is just their kicker, whatever that might be. It could be zero, but you can see that's all they're getting after their equity is paid back. Now you can set this shortfall to investors as no. You can set as shortfall as no, and that means you're now, no matter what happens, you're just not adding it. And it doesn't matter if you start clean or no, yes or no here, because you're just already saying you're not going to add any shortfalls. So now it's just the preferred return doesn't accrue, but you'll get the preferred equity gets any cash flows available up to that preferred return, and then anything else is applied to their equity balance. So they just get all these returns here, here, and then in year four, when there's more cash, now the rest of that equity is getting paid down. And some of it was paid down in year three. We went from 600 to 469 because we covered this 69,000 plus we had 131,000 left over. So still total 200,000 is the preferred, and we're able to reduce the equity position to 600 to 469. And then in year four, we're now clearing it out. So you got the 2 million. That takes it down. There's still 14 million left after we count for the preferred return and this equity amount. Um, and then all that's left after that is just any profit kickers, and you go from there for the rest of the cash flow split. This is the first time I've combined a waterfall like this with a preferred equity model. And I thought that is actually useful because um, it's it's easier to go from this complexity to a lesser complexity than trying to go from lesser complexity and then try to make something fit into something that's more complex. So this can fit more situations correctly. So we got the preferred logic that sits on top, and then cash flows after that. Well, we know here's what's left. Here's what's left for required uh, contributions, and here's what's remaining for distributions after that. And you can split these however you want. I just threw it into an equity waterfall with IRR hurdles. Um, Again, if you don't want hurdles here, you can just define how much you want to split this by between the investors and sponsor groups, common equity groups, or you can just do it pari passu or whatever. But this has the most complex logic you would need, and you can simplify it if you want. And then obviously, again, the final summary shows each group and their total cash flows accounting for distributions and contributions each year. So I think that covers it all. Um, Now you could have no preferred equity and just do it with the waterfall between, like, let's say you didn't have any preferred equity. Well, this still works. You just put in your contributions and distributions up here, and then there's nothing that flows, and then this just becomes what flows to the waterfall is exactly what's up top here, and then that's split based on all these hurdles. And usually the limited partner is going to do a lot more capital, like it'll be 80-20 or 90-10. um, and this, I'll just put if error here, so there's no preferred equity in existence. Give it a little NA if it doesn't exist. So I think that's it. I'll put this back to how we had it. I wanted, I think, 40, 15% kicker, and then common equity would be about 50, get 10% from the sponsor. And now you could do the remaining from the sponsor doesn't have to contribute. Like it could be all preferred and common equity from limited partners, and then the sponsor would get anything left. There's no return on investment because they didn't invest anything, but they get whatever this waterfall defines as their profit shares through the hurdles. So they would still start to get profit once the preferred equity's been paid and the common equity investors covered their hurdles. Um, and then the sponsor starts getting cash here. So the sponsor does not, in this case, have to have any contributions necessarily. But if they do, there's logic to account for it. So let's say we're adding shortfalls, but we're starting clean each year. Let me see. So here, but if we start clean each year, starting clean each year essentially just resets it. It's the same thing as saying um, don't add shortfalls. Because that's just saying the equity is what it is, and if you weren't able to cover the preferred return, that's fine. You just don't pay anything, and there's any cash, you just reduce um, the equity position. And here you can see there was not enough to cover the preferred return, so it's just they get the preferred equity gets that cash, but you're not reducing equity by anything until you actually cover the preferred return. And you can see if you put no here, then you're not starting clean, then you are adding the shortfall. And I don't think this is actually a necessary input. I'll just leave it for now so I don't, just in case there's a reference there, but this is more for the preferred return model. Preferred equity just needs you to worry about N2 and N3 cells. So that's going to drive how that works. All right, well, I guess that's it. Um, Again, this is preferred equity. It's different than preferred return, and we've got new logic. I think this is another piece of another tool that's really useful. Note this is not financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor. It's just a template. Use this at your own risk. All right, well, I'll see you on the next one.